Greetings and welcome back to this new episode, or more like rather a remake of a review. Anyway, what a mouthful, I will say. And it's been a long time since I don't make videos in English because most of my viewers are Latin Americans. They used to the Spanish layout or the Spanish formula. For my American viewers or for my speak English viewers, they haven't seen an English video for a long time, since the prototype video of Demon's Crest, and of course the topic of this video, the Super Metroid video, the Latino version. Around nearly 4 years ago, if you remember this video, I will show you right here. This is my childhood console, you can see right here. Yeah, it's not in perfect condition, as you can see all the years I beat up in most of the time, but it's still, hey, it still works after those years. And my game of the childhood, Super Metroid. This game is so super special for me. Everyone knows me, I'm a super fanatic Metroid fan. Everyone knows it. You will see I used to make videos in English. Second, that video was almost 4 years ago. That is the review of Metroid. I was recording some videos of this particular game, of course, and some footage and music because as you know me, I'm a huge fanboy of this game. You know me by this point. But I was watching the video it was yesterday, and I realized that it hasn't aged really well in terms of video quality. I mean, it has some good tips and some fun facts, of course. But in this case, it didn't age really well in terms of video quality. It was recorded at night, well, almost evening. The video was horrible. It was not 60 frames per second. I didn't know. It was simply because I was a complete Navi or complete newbie when it comes to editing at that point on. I didn't have the experience that I'm doing nowadays, the modern formula exactly. As a result, I wonder if I do English video this time around. Now, for my American viewers, will be a nostalgia memory lane because they always remember the days I used to speak in English. But the Spanish people will like this as a result because they never heard me in English. But for my old viewers, that some of my Latin American viewers who watched me in the old days, they knew what I mean as a result. So bear with me if you're not used to the English formula, especially for those who are just getting into this channel specifically. I'm not sure I'm gonna do another videos in English, but we'll see that later. But for now, back to the topic of this video. I'm gonna do a retrospective and review of this amazing masterpiece that is Metroid, specifically the original Super Metroid. As you may notice, I already made the original Metroid, as you see behind me, is specifically in Spanish, of course. I did an English version, but same as this one, it hasn't aged really well. So I plan to do an English version as well, but I need to think about it first because I have other projects in mind. But I digress. So let's talk about this game and how this game was made and how they developed, the mechanics, the gameplay. It's going to be a long video because I made a lot of footage about this game, especially some of the bosses. Not all of them because I only managed to half of the game. The other half I will show in pictures and photos, specifically a video that I made. So you will see that in later videos. So without further ado, let's go for it, my friends. Alright, let's get started, my friends. The Super Metroid was the number 3 of the franchise. It is the third game of the Metroid franchise specifically. It came out 3 years after Metroid 2 on the Game Boy. That's right, it came out in 1994, in March of 1994 specifically. But I'll put the day so people know what day came out specifically. So it came out 3 years after the original Metroid, and since the 86 to 1994, that will be like 8 years or 7. I'll put exactly how much long it takes, but it happens quite long, I will say. And to be specific, originally this game wasn't even going to be released because Sakamoto he was going to a trip on the United States because let's face it, when it comes to the franchise, Metroid wasn't the strong flagship of Nintendo. It was usually Zelda and Mario specifically, because in Japan, fantasy is king. Sci-fi stuff or Western stuff, Japanese, they're not interested. It's mostly for Americans, which they really like the sci-fi stuff. Japan doesn't. As a result, despite the original Metroid did succeed, it did not meet the expectation of Nintendo, unlike Mario and Zelda specifically. As a result, it didn't do very well, even though the original Metroid came out in 1986 on the Famicom Disk System specifically. More on that later. Then released in 1987 on the Nintendo Entertainment System on the NES. The only difference is the Japanese version has a lot more features, especially the soundtrack. It gave special sound effect or special sound or tracks on the Famicom Disk System, or FDS for short. As a result, it gave you special music, as you can hear right away. Compared to the original Metroid, which I recorded from my original Nintendo. As a result, you see the differences. In North America, it did quite well, but in Japan, it wasn't. So in 1992, 91, the team of R&D1, and this time without some of the members of the original Metroid, such as the creator of Metroid, which I'll put his photo right here, didn't participate in the second game. This time was another team, and the composer wasn't even Takana, which was the original composer, the iconic composer who made the original Metroid, and specifically the Kadri sound, which I really adore that sound. It was one of my favorite songs of the original Metroid. So they worked on Metroid 2, and Sakamoto wasn't even working. In fact, almost all the original team of the original Metroid wasn't even working. They were brand new members of R&D1 with low expectations. And they did a fantastic job to make a Metroid game on the little handheld, which is the Game Boy. But they had to make a few sacrifices. For example, in the original Metroid, you had color, you had more, let's say a little more in graphical part, more sprites, etc. But the original the Metroid 2 specifically didn't have that, because the original game was, well, black and white, or more like black and ugly shade of green in this case. As a result, they had to make something to make stand out on that green screen, specifically on those green pixels. As a result, they made it black and white. And that's why, if you see, I will show you in the cover art. Let me just the camera a little bit to see you closer. As you can see closer, you can tell why Samus has the power. This is the various suit, and yes, this is Ridley and Kadri's feet. You notice it has shoulders in it, and that is the reason why the shoulders shows up in Metroid 2. Is because Metroid 2 did have shoulders to make it stand out on the Game Boy. Because when you got the power suit, you don't see them. When you got the various suit, you got the shoulders to stand out in the background specifically. So the game was essentially made for the handheld, for the limitation of handhelds. It made a fantastic job to making a great experience. And to me, in my opinion, Metroid 2 is quite an underrated and underdog game, because most of the people who play the original Game Boy, they don't even care about it. They mostly play Wario Land, Tetris, or any of the other games, but Metroid 2 seems like people don't even care about it, and as a result, it did not so well. That's right, at this point you know it, Metroid 2 was a complete commercial failure. It did not do very well, despite it was a great game. It has some few flaws. For example, you still don't have a map. That means you have to figure out where to go, and it's more linear. The original Metroid is more open, more explorable, so you can play whatever you want. Well, this one, the Metroid 2, was completely linear. The linearest of them all was, in my opinion, was Fusion. It is the most linear of the 2D Metroid, specifically. As a result, you had no map, so you had to figure out where to go. And second, the limitation of the game caused a lot of problems. But it has one thing that the game did it quite right. In the original Metroid, it was passwords to the brim, and they're quite long letters. Seriously, you're gonna really sit down to roll the password and know what you're doing. And if you type the wrong password, you're screwed. But it has some iconics such as Justin Bailey, the Nasper Sword, some of the iconic password, which I mentioned in the review of Metroid, both in the Spanish version at least. So in that regard, they did the right thing to put that battery backup, which is a first of a series, well before Super Metroid. That's the thing got into the game specifically. Despite the Metroid 2 fail in Japan, in America, it did quite decently. People really enjoyed the game, especially when on the Super Game Boy. When Sakamoto decided to travel to America, he realized that some America enjoyed the Metroid games. He didn't realize how successful they are. So that got the motivation to get a new game specifically. And after see the Metroid 2, especially the ending, that's why you see the Metroid 2 or the little baby in the cutscene. Because if you put when you turn out the game tells you the story behind it. First is the original is Samus destroying Mother Brain, and then the second game, which the baby Metroid or the lobby Metroid was born and followed her. So Sakamoto thought about it, so it was included in the game specifically. So the game began in 1992, to be specific, and at the beginning of October in Japan, in autumn. As a result, he decided to get some members of the original team, such as Makoto Kano went as the producer, and Sakamoto passed as director. He was the original artist of the original Metroid. The original director was another person. And the composer, he decided to bring a new one since Takana was busy working on Mother 2, which is Earthbound in North America. As a result, he needs to be a new composer. He brought Mr. Yamamoto. So as a result, Yamamoto decided to make the music of this game in particular, along with another composer, which her name was Hamano, was her name. As a result, she worked at the Zelda Link's Awakening on the Game Boy. As a result, so she brought here in this occasion as a result as the other composer. One funny anecdote that she says during the development is that Sakamoto says that she made a voice of Samus when she dies. In fact, I'll give you. We don't know if it's her, but here's a sample that I saw on the cutting room floor, and along with others. And as you can see, they sound quite muffled, so it's difficult to. And she said it didn't sound at all. It was simply a failure. And Sakamoto was like, he knows exactly what has happened. And some of the voices sound so sexualized, which Sakamoto was like, oof. As a result, he removed that. It got scrapped. It's one of those that they tried to do that, but in the end, they didn't, specifically. As the rest of the team of R&D1 and Intelligent Systems, yes, this game was made alongside with Intelligent Systems, a company that worked closely together with Nintendo, and they were the responsible who make the franchise of Paper Mario, the RPG series. Well, I call them RPGs because Paper Mario changed along the years, but I'm not going to talk about that. Back to the game, of course. As a result, Intelligent Systems and, of course, R&D1 they were working busy on the game. Sakamoto decided that the first plan to make the game is let the studio or the team to learn the architecture of the Super Nintendo or Super Famicom that is called in Japan. As a result, they studied the architecture, the graphic material, how the sprite work, the programming, the music. It is completely different from the NES. For Sakamoto, it's quite impressive. Coming from the Famicom to the Super Famicom was quite different because remember, he worked on the original Metroid as the artist, and now as the director, and Makano Koto as the producer. And the general manager and the boss of the team, the leader of the R&D1, the guy who does the orders and the financial, is none other than the father of the Game Boy and the creator of the Game & Watch, and sadly the creator of the infamous Virtual Boy, which is none other than Gunpei Yokoi. Gunpei Yokoi wasn't particularly excited about the Super Metroid specifically because he knew the failures of the original Metroid and the abysmal results of the Metroid. As a result, he has low expectations of the games. As a result, he wanted to finish the game basically wanted to finish the game as quick as possible. But unfortunately, The team of Super Metroid and R&D1 and Intelligent Systems is nothing but problems and delays. As I mentioned before, it was nothing but more delays and troubles as a result in before the line. And they decided to try to learn the hardware specifically. As I mentioned before, they decided to learn the hardware, the software, etc. As a result, they create the designer of the game. They decided to make a debug mode to make it specifically made for the sprites, color palette, design, sprites, etc. As a result, they decided to make a tile designer called Smile. Yeah, Smile. It stands for Super Metroid Line Editor, and just it's just no excited. That's how I call it. In fact, that's the editor they use for putting the sprite, etc. So that's the tool they use specifically. In the debug menu, I'll show you the picture right there. It allows you to put tiles and objects, etc., including some of the unused rooms. In fact, I will show you some of them. For example, the unused room of Lower Norfolk Edge, the Black Benestar, and the Red Criteria, which was I kind of like the red sky. It looks more menacing, more evil looking, but it wasn't unused. But you get the idea. As a result, they made some areas of enemies they want to choose. For example, some enemies were unused, such as Cold Bang, Riffer, and Stoke, which it looks like a baby crocodile to me. More than a second. As a result, they decided to make those kind of sprite and use Smile as the specific designer. One thing that also they don't use, if you can see in there's an image taken for Zero Mission specifically. There's a Dragoon theme, but it was removed specifically. It's quite different because the HUD it was quite different. As a result, again they use the Smile editor, which again it stands for, repeat after me, Super Metroid Internet Level Editor. As a result, and if you want to know about Smile, you can easily download it if you want. It was released online in October 2003, which is 9 years after the launch of this mod. As a result, that's how the ROM hacks and ROM mods exist on the internet. As a result, you gotta be thankful that this editor still exists. As a result, there's also one rule on offer but it was made inaccessible prior to final release. Once again, Smiles tested feature as a result, and I will show you the room right here so you can tell what it is. There's also part of unused block rip block. It's called hard rip block. As a result, the hard rip block is which it would block some movements on the enemy except the way beam, so it passed through itself. But due to unused necessary error, it was difficult to implement it. As a result, it was never used. Another thing, they decided to ditch it, which is crazy. I never seen that before. In fact, not even my reviews clarify that, but that's the first I see. I found that on MetroidFact.net in fandom. There's in the in the asset statue in the upper left of the corner of final release, there was a question game over. Well, guess what? This is something that Sakamoto actually mentioned in an interview. Sakamoto said that when Samus die, get this, she's gonna be naked. And as I mentioned, the voice that mentioned by Hamano, well, those are the things I mentioned. Hamano made their voice, which I mentioned in the before, but unfortunately, Hamano said that the voice sounds so sexualized, plus it would sound muffled. They remove it. And as for the naked Samus sprite, was kind of a controversial, and because it reduces to the American sensitivity to nudity, plus the voice sounds too sexual, they decided to remove it. And Sakamoto says he has that version of the ROM. I was like, why? Interesting. He made it in an interview. As a result, there's also unused menu, but you can access with a Genie code. There's also some unused credits. Yes, they were unused credit. In fact, you can access by using the replay code. In fact, Metroid Center made a specific feature, so here you can see the credits of all the designers, and as you can see, there's so many stuff I could talk about, specifically the unused block on Norfolk. In fact, there's a light you can use it using the ray scope. In fact, I will show you the video what I'm talking about.
When you get closer, you'll see the hidden third eye. This Chozo eye seems to behave identically to the other two eyes, following you around the room with a harmless yellow light. And if you get far enough away, the light shuts off. Also, just like the other eyes, once the planet has been awakened, this eye will disappear. But what's really going on here? Unfortunately, the X-ray scope doesn't reveal anything, just a normal Chozo statue. Luckily, I have... When you enter the room, you'll see that there is actually an eye camera hidden behind the Chozo statue that looks similar to the other two. Oddly, this eye does have a couple of different properties from the other two eyes. For one, the eyeball itself is blue, rather than red. Also, when the light turns off, the eye turns around and then closes. I'm not sure why it has these properties.
So you can see it's quite crazy that a plug was there unused. So many stuff they cut in, but not as much as other games such as Super Mario, which they cut a lot of content. Or the original Metroid, they cut only the sprites that go in the other direction, which in the cover shows up, by the way. And so that's the cuts they cut out in this game specifically. With those materials, then they decided to make the art design of the monsters. Some of them, like Riddler, look really cool. Some of them were awesome as always, but some others look super cute, such as Crocomire looks way too cute for the game, and others like Dragoon or Mother look so gross, grotesque that Sakamoto was like, ugh, and they decided to let's kitschenize a little bit, and the others a little more meanie as a result. Because remember, the team that made Super Metroid, the team that worked on the past, we had Yamamoto, who worked on Punch-Out on the Nintendo Entertainment System, the version of the Nintendo System of Punch-Out, Mike Tyson Punch-Out. Sakamoto, who worked on the original Metroid. Hamano, who worked on Link's Awakening. And Makano, which was the director of many games, including the helper of Gunpei Yokoi, and many others. The rest of them are a bunch of newbies, specifically, just a bunch of new characters and new persons, which I will mention the entire list of the team complete, because I'm not going to mention all of them, there's too many of them. The group was like 16 persons in total, or 20 if I remember, but in the total, there were a bunch of new people working on it. I mean, again, it was worked R&D1 and Intelligent Systems. The project was called Metroid 3, which was the third game in this series specifically. But as I mentioned before, it was a lot of roadblocks and delays as a result. Mainly because they always seem to miss the headline or the head date to make the game deliver. And that really pissed off Gunpei Yokoi a lot. And to a point that threatened a lot of times to cancel the project in situ sis. As a result, Makoto Kano always warned to the people about when Gunpei is getting angry, specifically. As a result, the team had to wait hours and hours to make it workable and make the enemies specifically. And the development was quite hard. As I mentioned, it begins on the fall of 1999 with Makoto Kano asked if Yakamoto make a Metroid game for the Super Nintendo, saying that I'll create an environment for it. We should do it. In an interview of 2017, Sakamoto revealed that before the development of Metroid began, he traveled to Seattle, where the Nintendo America headquarters is, and he brought a Noah staff shopping mall onto a shopping mall, and they jokingly introduced a guy who named Metroid. The little surprise the reaction of the destroyer is, again, America seems to like the game better than Japan. Sakamoto later remarked in the development of the game on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System hardware. Completely different. That's why they made the first year of development as a learning point to the team, and they got a strong desire to make something that people would compare to like a movie. For example, Alien. Remember, the original Metroid is inspired by Alien. The name Ridley is from Ridley Scott, and the protagonist, Samus Aran, is inspired by Alien Ripley, which was a female character, which I mentioned before in the... Gosh, I just forgot about it. The original Metroid, I almost forgot it. It was the first game that used female characters, although most people think it's Miss Pac-Man. For me, it was the original Metroid. As a result, we know exactly that the character is a woman, which is extremely rare because most of the time you find male characters. As a result, that's the why Super Metroid was unique. And as a result, Sakamoto created a video on a VHS to convey the eeriness of feeling to show the iconic game of the title screen. Yes, the title screen. That's why you see the dun 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 dun, that title screen. Which that's why I got it. And the spies of the baby Metroid crying in the background in the storage surrounded. And the baby Metroid was produced by Yamamoto. And Yamamoto said that Sakamoto was really picky when it comes to the cries of the baby Metroid, specifically that dee that sound you hear right here. As a result, it was difficult for me. As a result, Sakamoto was fastidious about the Metroid shoot sound and ordered the design to create the scratch as P sound to convey into the motions apparently. For example, when it stops right before it kills Samus, it makes an uneasy sound before fleeing. Ahí está, Super Metroid. Sabroso. Ahora se va a comer a Samus. Déjale que lo haga. Ahí va. Y por cierto, es el bebé Metroid, solo que ahora en esteroides. And when it hurts one mother brain, it makes a pain sound like "Ayy!" And that's when the baby Metroid, the spoiler alert, when the last Metroid died and sacrificed his life for the universe, when mother brain killed her at the end of the game. Which I'll show you the video right here. Y ahí, señores, nuestro bebé Metroid sacrificó su vida por el bien del universo y de la galaxia. Y empezamos a pelear. And as a result, when I saw that scene, inside of me got broken, and I really wanted to destroy Mother Brain in one sitting. That gargantuan mother, etc. As a result, the opening came that Mr. Yamamoto himself, Kenji Yamamoto, well, you might ask how he made the oil that sound. Well, Kenji Yamamoto said that while he was riding a motorcycle from home to work, as his work were exhausting, and he commissioned home, when Yamamoto felt that he could relax, he parked his bike nearby and quickly recorded a scene that he was taught and for 3 minutes. And the next day, he digitized the version for Sakamoto, and he liked it. And that's on. And as a result, it's cemented on the intro of Super Metroid. One of my favorite intros, by the way. As a result, Sakamoto made a fantastic job along with Hamano to make the soundtrack really stand out. That's what the game is strong, because remember, the original Metroid was composed by Takana or Hip Takana. And remember, that soundtrack's iconic. Well, Yamamoto made it the hard job to make as iconic and as good as the original Metroid, and he delivered. That's why Super Metroid ended up one of my favorite soundtrack, OST soundtrack, in my history, specifically. As a result, I can imagine how it is, and not to mention the voice of the intro, the "La Last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace," which was voiced by Dan Olsen, which was the vice senior president of Nintendo America, which he made a fantastic job make the voice. The voice sounds super clean at the time, which is, you don't see that on any other console specifically. And then there's the cutscene told about this history, etc., etc. As a result, I'm not gonna talk the plot, because you know by now that Samus needs to, after the events of Metroid 2, Samus needs to go to the Golden Center, give the Metroid, then Ridley got the Metroid, then go back to Samus, and then have to destroy the 4 bosses, which is Ridley, Kadri, Dragoon, Phantom, etc. Which I'm gonna talk to the enemies later on. As a result, I'm not gonna tell the story. You'll know by this point, and the abilities I will tell you later specifically. The game has a lot of areas. In fact, the team has to make a map, which I'll show you thanks to Metroid database. As a result, you see the map complete. As I mentioned, the map of the Metroid took quite a while to make it finish. As a result, here's the entire map, which was complete. It took quite a while to make all the sprites specifically. The areas of the map is like this. You start at Seas Colony, then Criteria, then Vinistar, then it goes to Norfair, and after they get the high boots, you get back to. Normally I always skip them, but I always go directed to Cadre, which is the if you see the golden statue, which kind of amuses me all the time. When you see the gold statue, you have to defeat 4 bosses. Cadre is the first, the giant reptile, nothing to do with the original Metro, which was like a chameleon to me. This one is a mighty, powerful reptile giant motherfucker. As a result, but unfortunately, he's beats easy. As a result, just shoot super missile and he's dead. And you get the various suit. Yes, the various suit. And as you can see in the cover art, that's what you said right here. And one of the most iconic suit, by the way. Then you go to Norfair, which has 2 floors. One is the top one, and then there's the lower one, the Riddler's Lair, also known as the Ancient, which I adore the soundtrack of the game. Have a listen. That soundtrack is my favorite song of the game, and so no doubt, no complaints, sincerely. After the beat, Crocomire, which by the way has one of the most cruel and the most violent death I ever seen, and on Nintendo game. Have a look. I believe it's just it literally just burns into bones. It's just what? You don't see that on a Nintendo game at all. Then after a while, you got the record chip, which the dun 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 dun, which, by the way, it is the chip of Metroid Zero Mission, which it was the remake of original Metroid. Well, and that's what you get against the second boss, Phantom. Then after a while, you go to Mandarina, which against the third boss, Dragon. And then go back to Norfair to defeat Riddler, and then Toiran to defeat Mother Brain, and you get like that. The enemies, as I mentioned, Cadre is the giant motherfucker reptile. But again, he's pretty damn easy as a result. But he's enormous. Phantom is a ghost. It's basically flying around on the screen, and you have to deal with normal missiles. If he hits super missiles, he becomes aggressive and it tells you projectiles at you. Just use normal missiles. And the last part of it. Dragoon is an enormous sea creature. He's very powerful and has a strong armor. The only weakness is the grappling beam. Once you hook at it, you easily defeat it. Riddler, you all know it, the mighty pirate dragon. And finally, Mother Brain, which is the final boss. And there's also mini bosses such as the Toriso, the Spore, Crocomire, Tupoon, and the Goldie Toriso. And many creatures, which I'll show you all the creatures right here in front of the screen. There is a metrotonic variety of creatures in the planet, which I'm not going to mention all of them. I'll show you in all the pictures of the guy of the Super Metroid guy and Nintendo Power. In fact, I extract all the PDF files that you can show it to you to make it more detailed, and you can see all the files, which is quite impressive. And the name some confuses her. So there's a variety on the creatures, and the team, they made a fantastic job making the design art of the creatures, especially the power-ups, which I'm gonna mention in a few moments. The power-ups, when you get in the game, there are a metric ton of them, and that thing of good made to introduce a menu, which a first of a kind. You see the map, which is the first of a kind of the game. You see a map. Then you have the menu of the power-up, which you can enable, disable by toggling it. Something you can't do on newer Metroids. Why you couldn't do it in the newer games? It makes so cool. It makes it more exciting. And I always turn off the high boots, which I'm not a fan of those, because I've just never used them, except for some areas. But I never use the high boots. I use the techniques such as the bomb technique, the flip wall, or the ball technique, which I'll show you all the tricks right here in the video. Have a look.
But you have to time it right when you hit the ground. And as you can see, I held forward and the A button throughout the whole trick. Now,
I mean, hold L and R, push down twice, hold down, and then fire. Yep, that didn't work. Oh, there we go. Oh, sweet. Fuck yeah. So you saw that? It regenerated all my health.
And as you can see right there, they were kicking ass and really amazing. Just really fantastic. Again, the power-ups. There's a lot of them. You have the charge beam, the gravity suit, the virus suit, speed booster, missile, super missile, power bombs, reserve tank, grappling beam, X-ray scope, which I've never used it, because to me, the ray scope for me, it is the useless power-up in my opinion. I never use it. As a result, I always skip it, but you can easily find it if you desire. And there's also other power-ups, as I mentioned, such as you had the virus suit, the gravity suit, morpho ball, bomb, sprint ball, screw attack, remember the website. High Boots, Space Jump, and Speed Booster, which is the first, by the way. The power-ups they introduced for the first times are the Gravity Suit, Sprint Ball, the Speed Booster, and Space Jump. Those are the first introduced. As for the beans, you have the Charge Beam, Ice Beam, Waste Beam, Spazzer, and Plasma. The beams that exist in the original Metroid, you either have Long Beam, Ice Beam, or Wave Beam. I mentioned before that the Ice Beam was really useful against the Metroids, and the Wave Beam is really powerful, but you can't defeat the Metroids. Well, in this game, it combines all of them. You got the Charge Beam, the first of its kind. You can charge the weapon and make it powerful. And when you throw in the air, especially the moonwalk, if you want to press that. In fact, the menu is there. You toggle the moonwalk, you can do it, and etc. I'm not going to talk about that. But the moonwalk, you can activate it in the menu and go backward, but you cannot flip. But if you disable it, you can flip. The Ice Beam throws. Wave Beam, it transpasses the walls. The Spazzer is a really powerful weapon, and when you get the Plasma, it untoggles the Spazzer to get the Plasma specifically, which is the really powerful weapon specifically. And as I mentioned, the supplies such as the tanks and the reserve tanks. As a result, it gets a new variety of power-ups to replace the already amazing world of Metroid, especially the moonwalk, reference to Michael Jackson's moonwalk. In fact, I'll show you the video right here with the Michael Jackson moonwalk. This is the version because I don't want to get copyright strike. There we go. And so on as a result. And the gameplay will show you more in a second. As a result, you got the areas, the enemies, which I told you before, and some friends that introduced for the first time. Let me introduce the friends. Octagons that you can find obviously on Vinstar. You find the Vinstar and the Cora. You find on Vinstar. As a result, I'll show you in the picture how they look like, and they will help you out in the world of Metroid specifically. You find it again in Fusion as a result. You also find Tori and Tori Jr. specifically, which you can find it on the Grappling Beam area as a result in Mandarina. And the big Metroid, which you guessed it, is the baby Metroid. You find it on Toyran, now it's big. But once he absorbed the Metroid almost kills Samus, it reminds you who he is. And as mentioned, he sadly sacrificed his life as a result. And that's all the enemies as a result. They made a great variety on the enemies specifically all the time. But unfortunately, with all the enemies, with all the maps, all the kind of stuff, they delay quite a lot for like 3 years working on the game. And the more passing by, Gunpei is getting more angry than ever, and this time threatening to kill the game for real. And Makoto was getting worried, and he warned Sakamoto about it to get quicker in the feet. And one time, Yamamoto gets angry because they couldn't really finish, and by the whole of the season of 1994, by 1983, in the beginning of 1994, they still didn't finish the game. And as a result, Sakamoto decided to add something that is prohibited on Metroid, is to add outsiders to test the game, including his wife and children to test the game, which is prohibited in Nintendo Corporation specifically. As a result, the group worked for hours non-stop and non-sleep, and some of them don't even left the house, and some of them they had to go use the resort sleep to sleep at least, and sometimes they joking around of the other teams, saying that it smells like a zoo specifically, which was quite funny, I would say. And some part were special. For example, if you see the enemies on Dragoon, one developer, I'll put his name, he stick to the code and put the babies of the dragon of Dragoon, made a weird pattern. Well, it made a message as a result. I'll put the message how it looks like.
Antes de la pelea con Dragon, el jefe de Maridia, hay un grupo de enemigos que hacen un pequeño baile. Sus movimientos en realidad trazan las letras de una frase en inglés, Keiko Love. Keiko era el nombre de una chica con la que salía en ese momento, pero estaba muy ocupado en el trabajo todo el tiempo y no podía verla mucho, así que por la noche, mientras todos en la oficina dormían, tomé la computadora un momento e introduje ese código. Ese pequeño baile no estaba escrito en los documentos de planificación en ninguna parte, así que recuerdo que mi corazón latía rápidamente mientras lo codificaba, con la preocupación de que lo descubrieran, pero al final nadie supo de eso. ¿Acaso esto no es una historia romántica?
It is mentioned on Gamer Culture as a result, and many others. And finally, the team made the impossible. They finished the game in a matter of long 3 days, and as a result, the game was complete. And Gunpei tested the game, and he loved it. Sakamoto says that Yoko is not the type of person who gloating or elevate the happiness of the game. None of that, but he said the game could be successful. Unfortunately, it did not. This game failed miserably in sales, which is kind of a shame, sincerely, because they made a fantastic job, excelling, breaking the boundaries of existence to create one of the best games and make a lot of talent as a result, and so many histories behind it. And it's kind of a shame, sincerely, because again, they made a lot of great job to make the game make more substantial. And it came out in 1994, but by then, many of the games, and sadly, was eclipsed by Revere's game, which is Donkey Kong Country, which was eclipsed immediately and became the third game on the Super Nintendo, which was quite impressive. Although but because of its failure, it did not mean that the game was bad. The game is a truly R&D1's masterpiece. As a result, it made a huge, enormous legacy. Both gamers and speedrunners, especially speedrunners, were the popular choice of the game as a result, and some of them made the most high-end tier text on the mall. The fastest are Zoid and Behemoth 87, most specifically, especially other gamers. It was also ported on many other consoles. It was released on the Wii U and the Virtual Console in August 22, 2010, the month of Metroid. It was also included as a shortlist on Super Smash Bros. And Wii U, allowed to play 3 minutes in different saves. As a result, it also was included on the Super Nintendo Classic Edition as well as the Nintendo Switch Online service. It's basically truly a masterpiece. Now, originally this game was included as an unlockable on Metroid Prime specifically, but instead they chose the original Metroid. In fact, in the final version of Prime, Metroid is unlocked by connecting the fusion card. However, Sumento was written at his role. Only evidence is the beta menu by Danny Richardson. In fact, I will show it to you. Danny Richardson's portfolio, an anonymous ex-retro employee, clarified the misstatement that Danny Wishes has the build of Enterprise successfully using third-party emulator, but because Nintendo opposed to such a practice, they ordered to remove the game, leading to replacement of the Metroid with a custom emulator. Retro later discovered having the unlockable as X2's but time constraint different included. There's more information I can do it, but again, that will be a long video. There's also a lot of trivias. Super Metroid, again, it was almost cancelled because of Gunpei Yokoi during the time of development and the fact that the largest game ever created. Yes, 4 mega power, which is 3.26 megabytes of ROM specifically, quite big in my opinion. It was also subtitled. Originally was also subtitled Super Metroid: Return of Mother Brain. Metroid is the only sprite-based system which has the grappling. The game was appeared on Super Nintendo Entertainment System micro game called Super Smooth. Yep, a little cameo by the way. The music of, like I mentioned before, some of the music were included, such as Metro Icons at the beginning of the game, which is Don't Waste It, and Metroid Prime, which you guess the impact, the Prime series borrows some of the music on this specifically. And even Screw Attack used a lot of the music of the Metroid because, again, Screw Attack specifically. And many others and many ideas out there. I can go for hours to the story of Metroid, but again, it will be a long video. But again, if you want more information, all the links in the story is down in the description. It's quite crazy that the team made a fantastic job making the original Metroid, specifically the all. Now it is time to show you the gameplay. Strap on and get ready because I'm gonna talk and gonna dissect the game to the brim. So get ready, we go begin. So here we go. Okay, Super Metroid begins with one of the best, if not the best intro that will give you shivers on your skin. Listen to this. one of the best intro ever, along with Demon's Crest, of course, and some other games that has one of the greatest intros, such as Contra Free, and etc. etc. So I'm not gonna tell you all that stuff, of course. Let's begin with the game. Of course, it will give you an introduction of the previous two games, which is Metroid 2 and the original Metroid, as you can see on the screen, and the voice of the announcer by Dan Olson. Just listen to this.
The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
How crazy it is how clean is this thing look. Super clean and super crisp. And the story begins with Samus telling the story of Mother Brain being defeated, the love of Super Metroid 2, etc. I'm not gonna talk all that plot because if not, just listen to the music by obviously Kenji Yamamoto made the voice. Yep, the voice of the song. Just listen. It's just sublime to me. The game begins of the Zero Station, as I mentioned before. The goal is easily, obviously, you have to go to point A to point B to find the baby Metroid, the Lavi Metroid, who was captured by Ridley, the Pirate Dragon. Defeating the dragon is pretty damn easy. All you have to do is shoot, and that's it. There's nothing much difficult about it. Or not in a second. As a result, once you got, if you didn't get the baby, he escaped to Sevis, the planet of when the Chozo used to live there. So you escape the chip, get the chip, and that's it. Although if he didn't escape, they explode and the chip doesn't show up. That's all it tells. When you get to the game, you will experience one of the first atmospheric scenarios on planet Sevis. Listen. It's just amazing. This game is specifically screen exploration because that's why you get the term. In fact, this game, along with Castlevania Symphony of the Night, then the term of Metroidvania. This game and the other get the term. Some people don't like it, but me personally, I embrace it, obviously, and that's how I got games like Action Verge, Hollow Knight, Silicon, etc. So many games I will talk about. That's the game. Well, it didn't pioneer it. Remember, you had the Goonies and the original Metroid, which did first, and Castlevania 2. But this is the game that finally, and along with Castlevania Symphony of the Night, that cemented it. The goal, obviously, you have to explore every part of the planet, finding secret items, hidden weapons, etc., etc., using your own tricks such as the wall jump, the bomb tricks, etc. Which I'm not going to talk about all the techniques which I mentioned it before in the video, but it's worth mentioning here. So the idea is to basically explore all the things. You need an item, go back and find it. When you get an item, you back and you find the item was under there, etc. The game screens backtracking. Normally, a lot of people don't like backtracking in most games, but this is the game that it feels you addicted to find items you don't find, and somebody basically miss specifically. And you find power-ups, as I mentioned. There's 5 power-ups. We have the normal beam, the charge beam, the spazzer beam, the wave beam, plasma, and the hyper beam. Finally got it at the defeat Mother Brain, of course, specifically. There's also the suits, of course. You start with the power suit, which is the normal suit that the Chozos gave you. Then you got the gravity suit, or the variable suit, of course, which is named after the original Metroid. And the brand new gravity suit, which is a new addition of the game, specifically with the plasma beam and the spazzer, of course. And then you had the bombs. Normally you had the normal bombs, and then you had the power bomb, which is a new thing, of course. Then you got the super missile, again a new thing. This game screens new weapons: the super missile, power bombs, gravity suit, plasma, spazzer, spring ball, etc. And some other technique. If I will show you all the weapons, which I'm not gonna mention all of them, but each has a technique. In fact, The power bomb give you some additional weapons, which probably you don't know is if you put a power bomb, then use the charge, that specific example, ice beam, it will give you an order. In fact, I'll show you a video of another gameplay, another YouTuber explain that ability. So you can see, you get a lot of abilities specifically. The graphics of the game is superb, beautiful, stylish, pixel artwork of the finest quality, and that's why this is the why Gunpei Yokoi allegedly bragging about the game more than Donkey Kong Country, because recently I watched the video of Gamer Culture, and in an interview he said that it was too 3D as a result, in quotes, as a result, and let me say, of course, he's more a fanboy of Metroid than anything else, knowing that he almost canceled the game or so many threats. Quite mysterious. I don't know how Gunpei Yokoi react, but being the pioneer of the Game Boy and the notorious Virtual Boy, who knows? But graphically, it's sublime and sometimes really dark and eerie as a result, compared to the original Metroid, which was the classic 8-bit art. Which, and let me say, the original Metroid was ahead of its time when it was released. If you remember the episode that I made a few weeks ago of the original Metroid, well, I mentioned that the game was ahead of its time. Well, Super Metroid is another example, being ahead of the time. It was different from other games, and pretty much a leap in graphics, because we come from the NES, which the 8-bit world. Then you had the small and green screen of the Game Boy or Metroid 2 with its limitation, and then this game that screams, and some people claim and some argue that's one of the, if not superior, than Metroid Fusion and Zero Mission, and some with Prime. But again, it's on fans, of course. Remember, Prime and Super Metroid are completely different. Prime is a first-person shooter, while this one is a 2D Metroidvania style adventure game. So again, Metroid fanboys are really taking serious about it, so I'll tell you that. Then you have the gameplay, of course, sublime, perform, perfection. You can climb walls, use the bombs, use different. This is something that this game has, versatility. The two next games, Fusion and Zero Mission, doesn't allow you nothing. It is the Fusion is super linear, and as a result, it screams you that why you put so linear in this case. I love Fusion, of course, it's one of my favorite Game Boy Advance games, but come on, give some variety. Same with Zero Mission. And some people like Zero Mission, and some might not agree with me, but it needs a little more polish. Being the remake of the original Metroid is cool. It has some improvements and some life changes, but a little more more in variation of the weapons. So that's why people scream about the Super Metroid screen. It allows you to disable and enable suit. Let's say if I want to run the Norfair with no gravity suit and no virus suit, you can. Beat the game with no weapons, sure. Beat the weapon with no high boots, you can do it, like I do. I never use them, except for some areas. And some items are skippable. For example, the spring ball, some people skip it. Me, I do find it really useful to jump areas that are quite difficult using the bone technique, but it is optional. Same thing with the X-ray, which I got to admit, it is one of the worst items in the game. I'm sorry. The weapon, it allows you to fight hidden ninjas, but for me, it's useless as a ball and chain, because you can easily find it by just exploring, that's it. Unless you really want to be completionist, it is there. It's located at the Royal Soul Brimstar, but for me, it's meh to me. So I always skip it in most of my gameplays and focus on other items. In fact, I got to admit, I'm more one of those who like to speedrun it, but I'm nowhere near in the league as Soy or Behemoth. I forgot his name, but such a jerk. I put the name, the speedrunner. But I'm trying, but I'm nowhere near in the league. I'm more an amateur speedrunner, so I like to go faster as I can. But it depends on my mood. Sometimes I want to explore everything, and sometimes quickest as possible to get the best ending. Yes, this game, just like the original, there's a timer. If you do it under, well, we don't know how the timer is. If you do it under 300, you get the Samus with all his glory. If you do it after the 3 minutes until 8, you get Samus with just the helmet, and then finally with all the armor. In fact, I'll show you the page from the strategy guide of Super Metroid as a result. Another cool unique about this game is story, the plot of the game, the lore of the game. This is the third part, and Sakamoto says it's gonna be the last game ever created. That's why he made the most beautiful story as a result, and most notably the ending. For example, the sacrifice of Viva Metroid, which still haunts me, still hits me every single day. The Final Revenge on Model Brain with the Hyper V, the rescuing the Edocons and the Dragoria at the end of the game. Yes, save the animal. Don't be cruel. I know some people do this, but save the animals. Without it, this feels wrong to me. Well, at least to me. But believe me, it changed. When you save, then you see a dot on the end screen. Believe me, it is there, right there. If you don't believe me, here it is. Here's the dot, right there. Right the dot. Anyway, back on track. As a result, it has a lot of lore in the game, more lore than the previous game. The previous two games, the first one, the story is a little shallow. The second game has a little more meaningful. The Born of the Baby Metroid. This one has more lore. Although the one has the most lore and plot is Fusion. That one is the most story driven, and I freaking love that. I got to admit. As a result, another thing that this game screams of perfection, well, in my opinion, is the music. Yamamoto and Hamano made a fantastic job on the music, and here's some of my favorite tunes on the screen. Have a listen. Superb, I will say. Music is great, graphic is great, playability is great. Everything is a masterpiece. No other game can touch it. Unless you want to compare with Fusion instead of Mission, but again, it's an argue, of course. And most people say that it surpassed Dread. And sales, it did. In fact, recently it surpassed the sales of Metroid Prime. As a result, in sales, it did. But I did play Metroid Dread a couple whiles ago, and I like it. I like the game, which is extremely rare for a retro gamer, old school, pure class like myself, playing a modern game. But because it's Metroid, and because I'm a fanboy Metroid, I gotta do it for the good of the fan base. I did, and I kind of like it. And it's going pretty damn easy, but it didn't have the same impact to me with Super Metroid being for nostalgia, in quotes, as a result. And that's about it, sincerely. Other than the creatures, of course, you got several creatures that I don't even know what they are, except including the bosses. You got Cadrid, Dragoon, Phantom, etc., etc. You have all the creatures right here. If I can put the collage of all the creatures in action. Well, some of them. Unfortunately, I don't have all of them as a result, but here we go. Bueno, muchos pensarán, ¡oh! ¡Game over! No, señorito. Apenas Mother cae, sale su segunda forma. Y esa forma es... Adivina. Ahí está. Mother Brain T-Rex. Que comienza la batalla. Ahí viene. La arma más poderosa de todas. El Hyper Beam. Así deja Samus. And that's something that the game about improves, the sprites. The original game has a lot of limitation, and some sprites got cut. This one doesn't. It has all of them. Again, the team had to learn the hard way, as Sakamoto said. As a result, that's all it is. And that's all Super Metroid will say. It's a lot of has a lot of improvement of the original. In fact, it surpassed the original Metroid in terms of graphic, playability, let's say replayability, music, graphics, the lore. Everything is superior in this case. Obviously, the original Metroid is still one of the it's not a classic, but let's say a lot of people prefer this game over the original, and I can get that. In fact, some of my friends don't even like the original Metroid. I do love the original Metroid, but Super Metroid made a significant impact on most Super Nintendo owners, as well as Super Famicom, of course. In fact, this game was more recognizable in the States than in Japan. Japan, it did poorly in sales, which is kind of a shame and sad to me that this game didn't do in Japan, but in the States and Europe, it did. And hey, that's remember, it is my first Super Nintendo game that I ever played. Some people made a video of me talking about how I remember the game, kind of like pixel to pixel style, which in his reviews he made reports and then he's remember the game. I will do that someday, but that's another time. And that's Super Metroid, my friends. Sorry that it's a little short, but that's all I can describe because I will describe it already in the story, but not bad to describe all of it, but hey, that's all I can do. Anyway, to the conclusion, my friends. I hope you liked the video and you find some interesting fun facts and some curiosity as well. Some tricks I made on this particular game, the Super Metroid, which is indeed to my heart. It was my first Super Nintendo title, if not the first that I started on the Super Nintendo, especially the Junior you see behind me on the setup, specifically my humble RetroGaming setup. And I'm not gonna talk about more detail because I already explained it in the Spanish version. Although I got to confess, that Spanish video is super long. But if you haven't seen it, check them out if you're interested. But the thing is, it is truly a masterpiece. And it's really a shame that this game didn't sell very well. And they made a lot of pull and effort. The team of R&D1 and the creator of Metroid, well, most likely the artist, because the creator of Metroid was another person. If I can put the name right here, if you mind. But the artist of the game, the original Metroid, you see behind me, Sakamoto, well, made a fantastic job as a director. Although he didn't work on the second game, Metroid 2, that was another team of R&D1, but he did work with it alongside with the producer, Makoto Kano, and the multiple reps of Gunpei Yokoi, the father of the Game Boy, for canceling the project and move on to other things. In the end, he adored this game, which is crazy to me that. And normally, Gunpei wasn't a guy who just go like gloating around, or more like you know what stuff. So I'm not gonna tell that much the story. Basically, there's more better stories you can and tell on other YouTube than in my channel, but you get the idea. But anyways, it is a shame that this game didn't succeed very well, and it didn't sell very well. In fact, it is below the 10 top tips of the most sale N64 computers. If you ask sales of the Super Nintendo games, we talk about Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario All-Stars, and of course Super Mario World, which I did a review of this game already in my channel in Spanish, of course. If you haven't yet, again, check them out if you're interested. But in the end, despite it didn't sell very well, and despite it failed to produce numbers that Nintendo really put any effort on the sequel. In fact, Metro 64 when never came out. That wasn't until Prime that finally got a good number in 60s, but that was until the GameCube. That's a result. It jumps one generation, typical of Metro. That the same happens to the Wii U, which it jumps to the Switch, which is Metroid Dread on the Nintendo Switch, and another Formula 6. But anyway, as a retrospective, again, masterpiece. It is if not one of the best Metroid games, and my favorite Metro of all time, and of course the Metro that started in the retro gaming businesses as a result. Anyway, I hope you like this video, and who knows, I'm gonna do another English video, which is who knows. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you guys see you in the next time, and game on.